All right. Hello, everybody. I would suggest we start. Let me just share my screen. Well, one moment. That was the wrong one. All right, you should be able to see my presentation. So great. Thanks that you all are here, and welcome to our webinar on how to include persons with blindness or low vision in innovation processes. We are very happy that you are here, and we are really looking forward to this webinar. Yeah, my name is Sarah Wist. I'm a researcher at the Dialogik. It's a non-profit research organization or institute in Germany. And together with my co-worker Raine Kuhn, we are facilitating this webinar. And also on board with us is Andre Martinuzzi, the coordinator of the Live-in Innovation Project, who will give you a little overview of the project and what innovation with blind people means in the context of RRI. And then we have three really interesting keynote speakers. And first, there's Klaus-Peter Wegge, the head of the Siemens Accessibility Competence Center. He will talk a little bit on how to do workshops with blind people. And he gained insight from the workshops he did in the Live-in project. Then we have Anja Gröll. She's a researcher at the Institute for Managing Sustainability in Vienna. And based on the workshops from Klaus-Peter and some more insights, she developed 7 tools on moderation, and we're looking forward to see that. And then we have Luca Breda, the founder and CEO of Aquasis, and he was also the supervisor of a project with blind people, and he's also going to talk about this. Before we start, we have the obligatory rules for today. You are all muted, that's perfect. And if you have any questions, please type them in the chat or raise your hands, and we will come back to them later on. And we would like to see your faces if you post the questions, so please turn your camera on then and only then. And I want to make you aware of that this is live at the moment, and it's going to be published on YouTube. So if you don't want to be seen, please switch off your cameras all the time unless you are addressed. And if you don't want to be seen on YouTube, then I would ask you to leave and watch this all on the internet. Exactly. We also have some shortcuts for a better accessibility. So if you are using a Windows system, then you have the Alt plus V to start or stop your video, the Alt plus A to mute or unmute your audio, the Alt plus Y to raise or lower your hand. And the shortcuts for the keyboard on Mac is Command-Shift-V to start or stop the video, Command-Shift and A to mute or unmute your audio, and Option plus V to raise or lower your hand. And if you are joining us by phone, then you have the star and 5 to lock or unlock the meeting, and the star 6 to mute or unmute yourself. And if you are here by telephone, you can unmute yourself and post your question, of course. So this is easier. Exactly. What are we going to do today? So we are right in the middle of the introduction. The little background will come from Andre in a minute. Then we have the presentation from Klaus-Peter. And after each presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask comprehensive questions. And the discussion is at the end, as you can see on the agenda. Then we have Anja with her 7 moderation tools. And after that, be aware, we're going to pose a question to keep you a little bit more involved. And after Anja, then there is Luca. And then we have a broad discussion with all of you. And we are really looking forward to your questions. So, but for now, I would give the floor to Andre to tell us a little bit about the project and more.
Good afternoon. If you're joining us from Europe, hello. This is another event in a series of events, webinars, online dialogues, co-creation labs. No, stick to the previous one, please. that takes place in the course of the Living Innovation Project. The Living Innovation Project started about 3 years ago. We've done quite some interesting work on how to create business opportunities out of being responsible. We've seen that a lot of companies commit themselves for sustainable development, for being responsible in a general sense, but if they then try to apply it in innovation management, in innovation departments, R&D departments, development departments, whatever, they struggle with the term, what does it mean to be responsible? And we tried to find a narrative that is not threatening to companies. It's not about telling them, you have to, sure you have to. Yes, you have to behave in a certain kind of ethical way. You have to consider acceptability and desirability of your innovations. But to make it concrete, we developed a narrative. This is on the next page. A narrative that tries to translate the concept of responsible innovation to the business sector. And it consists of 3 elements. The element of being responsible for impacts. This means that you innovate with a purpose, that you consider what will happen with your innovation in a broader sense. Not just if your innovation is taken up by the markets and people buy it and people want to have it, but there might be some negative second-round effects. Just remember all these stories about asbestos and nuclear power and so on that cost us as a society much more than it ever brought us. So it's about assessing technologies and innovating with purpose. This is not in the focus today. In the last column, you see that it's also innovating within systems. This addresses sustainable development and resilience because many of the systems we live in currently were not designed on purpose. They just emerged. We live in a health system, and we've seen that this has some flaws with the COVID crisis. We live in a global economic system, and then a ship has some trouble in a canal, and then the canal is stuck, and then we have problems in global supply chains, and so on. So these systems are an object of co-designing when different companies, different societal groups join forces and they design these systems. That's the second element of responsible innovation. But today, it's mostly about people. It's about responsibility towards stakeholders and innovating with people, which means with the people and for the people. It means to involve as broad diversity as possible of people into innovation processes. And when we talk to large companies and we talk about be open, involve people, most of them say, yes, we already do that. You know, open innovation, we know that concept. And if you then give up, you don't have any discussion anymore, but then you can ask the very nasty question, well, whom do you involve in your open innovation processes? And the most common answer then is, well, lead users. So who are the lead users? In many cases, urban, young, male, techno nerds, the usual suspects, the ones that play around with innovations, that play around with new technologies, and they are not the ones that are the ones that perhaps need them most, the ones that want to use them. So when you design your innovation just with techno nerds, just with lead users, it might not be a design, an innovation that fits for all. And this is where the topic of our workshop today comes in. This is the topic how to involve people who normally are not, it's not so easy to involve them because they are visually impaired, they're blind, it's not easy for a facilitator. So if you just think of facilitating such an innovation workshop, perhaps you've never dealt with people that have problems in seeing what you write down, in seeing the cards that you show them, in your facilitation toolbox. And it's also a question of designing innovations that fit not just for the one people and the other people, and this group and this group and this group, perhaps design for all, an approach where it's not designed for a specific purpose of a special needs group. It's a better design for all. And we've seen that this is often a case when companies first try to design specific, whatever, appliances, home appliances, tools, whatever, to special needs people. And then they find out if we take one step back and we rethink the design, perhaps the outcome is a design that even fits better and suits better all. And this is why we had this idea. Actually, it was Klaus-Peter who joined our group and said, well, he would like to work on accessibility in the course of the Living Innovation Project. And the Living Innovation Project is a large, nice playground for a lot of different ideas, a lot of different approaches. And at Siemens, they've done a marvelous job in designing such kind of labs, in running such labs. And Klaus-Peter will tell you today a little bit more about what were the outcomes. And Anja will tell you more about the tools we developed. Before doing so, on the next slide, please forgive me for a short advertisement break. There will be another event. Yes, on June 15th, there will be an online dialogue on mental health and work-life balance. So we've seen that during the last 16 months, many people had to work from home. I had to do as well. And some people said it's not so nice. In the beginning, it was very, very nice, but then it's difficult to find the right balance between work and life and to stay mentally healthy when you're online all of the time. And we heard some companies telling us, well, they know that there are some trouble. There's some trouble out there. And we would like to have an open debate on this. What are these challenges and how could they be addressed by companies, by managers, by technologies? And we are happy that the global head of human resources in corporate development at Siemens, Michael Volvatschny, will join us. We have one expert from the International Labour Organization, Manal Assi, who's senior occupational safety and health specialist. So Michael Volvatschny will give us some insights into what they already do in Siemens to address these challenges. Manal Assi will give us some insights on what is happening on a global scale during the last 16 months. And Nita Chinsa, who's professor in Canada and a thought leader on human resource management, will bring in her perspective as leading scientists in this area. So that's the advertisement break. Sorry for that. Now let's continue with the workshop today.
Thank you, Andre. And you already said something I wanted to say, but that's if you say it twice, it's more important. So thank you for that. But anyway, we could pose the question, so why inclusive innovation on a broader scale? And of course, we have an aging society in most of Western societies, especially, and we have more and more people with needs because they are visual or hearing or mobility is impaired. So there's an urgent need for inclusive innovation, and it's also in line with the principles of RRI. And here's the point you already said, Andre, that our goal was not to talk about the people, but with the people. And we even put it a step further and said, okay, let's do innovation. Let's innovate with them and not for them. And yeah, so let's dive into the first presentation, which is from Klaus-Peter. And the floor is yours. And while you will set up your presentation, I can tell that you are going to talk about how to set up and facilitate workshops for blind and visually impaired people. So here you go.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Andre. And I'm the technical nerd Andre talked before, but I think it's completely necessary to include or to extend the user group involved in the co-creation in the RRI process. First of all, design for all, what are we talking about? Design for all is essential for 10% of the population, necessary for 40%, and comfortable for 100%. I'm always asking people, do you intend to disregard 40% of your potential customers? What is accessible design? People have different types of disabilities. For example, sensory impairments, that's seeing, hearing, feeling, touch, and so on. It's motoric, movement, grasping, handling, fine motorics. And of course, some cognitive impairments. That does not mean always Alzheimer. It does mean stress, recognition, decision under stress, and so on. ICT especially shall be barrier-free if it is detectable, reachable, and usable for persons with disability. And now it's important in this usual way, without particularly difficulties, and as a rule, without help from others. And the use of assistive technology is, of course, allowed for this group. The goals of our design is the usage of products and services, yet now especially for our target group today, persons with visually impairments. And we distinguish usage with no vision, that means complete blindness, with low vision, that means very poor vision, less than 30% is the usual term, with limited vision, that means you can somewhere you use glasses and that works out. With limited or without color perception, that's a very high group in our population. And of course, sometimes you need some assistance and you need some assistive technology aids. So to give you an impression what visual impairment means, we have prepared 5 pictures of a crossing. You can see this and compare this due to the different types of visual impairments. It's not easy to explain, and I don't want to try it. This is simply an experiment to show you where are the limits, where are the goals, where are the challenges. And we cannot visualize the position of blind persons, but even in that group where the sense is not available, you have different groups. Birth blind persons who have never seen something, persons who got blind during the during age, and of course persons who got blind in the higher ages. We have very different views in this world. We performed for this group of blind and visually impaired persons 2 different workshops. The one was a workshop of identifying functional requirements for accessible products and services, especially for radio amateur devices. That's because we had a special user group invited. And a second workshop series, I have to say, functional requirements for a mobility application which presents relevant information and which gives access to mobility services. When preparing a workshop, we have to think about several issues. First of all, we decided to recruit participants via partner organizations using their information channels, and that makes it easier to identify the right persons to include in our workshops. We conducted preliminary interviews to learn about the person, to get the impression, do they fit? Are they suitable for the workshop? Are they interested? And so on and so on. And we wanted to find out their ICT affinity, because we not only want the super users, we want the average users, presenting most of the population, or the whole population. And that's the trick. We explained them a lot of issues which are normally at the beginning of the workshops, because this would save a lot of time. What are the conditions for the successful workshop for this group? This is, of course, the setup of an accessible location, how to reach, how to move there, and so on. We provided work material for blind and visually impaired users, and Anja will tell you more in detail on that. That means large print, braille, and audio information. And that's very important, the briefing of the assisting people for the workshop, because they are very important to have a successful workshop. On the next slide, we have selected some do's and don'ts, what a workshop facilitator should do and what she not should do. For example, if you want to help a blind person, approach the person and offer the help, not just touch the person. use normal language terms like see you again, no problem. It is more than just polite to present yourself with your name at the beginning of a speech or a contribution. When giving a presentation, you have to verbalize all information, all important information. And it is very useful to provide the documents, for example, the slides for such a presentation as we have today in advance, or at least afterwards in accessible format. And provide a acoustically clean and quiet environment. Make sure there are no obstacles, and make sure there is sufficient light available. What are the don'ts? Address directly the blind person, not their companions. Never touch a guide dog when it is under duty. Avoid disability-specific or discriminating language. Do not make assumptions on the abilities or capabilities of a blind person. And of course, be careful of obstacles. The second workshop, we performed the first workshop in a special hotel for blind persons. The target group were technic-affine persons. About 16 persons attended the workshop, and it was very much concentrating on how to improve products, especially, of course, the devices technical affine amateur radio people like to use every day. This was a half-day event, and here are some impressions from the workshop. And of course, it's interesting. We were the first time to try it out to use Lego for creating 3D models of devices. This was the first approach, and Anja will report you more details on this interesting approach. And we run out of time, but we will continue to improve this approach more and more and to develop a better method from that. And then we have some impressions on the facilitation, the hotel, and so on. It's not easy to give you a complete summary of the outcome, but the most important is the first one on the next slide. The needs of blind persons are very different depending on age, training, type of reduced vision. So we have a lot of demands, requests for solutions. For example, why are some products not accessible? Why are some products accessible, but only to some small extent? And there are, of course, some demands. We are talking so often about artificial intelligence. Why don't we have artificial intelligence solutions as assistive technology for blind persons? The second workshop was about smart mobility. And here the intended participants was a very different group. These are very interested and somewhere knowledgeable people who want to have some influence on the future of the mobility of persons with disabilities, especially for blind persons. And when starting this workshop in a physical way, shit happens. Corona came, and suddenly we were standing there. What shall we do with a started workshop on mobile assistance services, and how can we continue in this Corona crisis? And we decided to do it as web workshops, which is, of course, a challenge for the persons who cannot see or are blind. And we had to spend a lot of efforts. But interestingly, at the end, the switch to the web-based workshops had finally a positive impact on the willingness to participate over the complete series of workshops, because time and cost for traveling was saved, and as well as the the organization of traveling, which should be barrier free. So the interesting thing was the participating people supported us more or less whole the time, and the success will be presented later. We had, of course, some technical issues. We had to first to identify what web solution is most accessible. We have to configure the system. We have to test the system. We have to guide participants and help to set up their systems. Sarah provided you with some information on the keyboard access of this tool we are using today. This is important, and it was not self-evident this information was published at that time. So we had to learn to help simplify the use, we have to simplify the login, and we spent a lot of time to set up these workshops. But finally, they worked out very well. And beside the technical challenges, we had a lot of organizational challenges. We had to split the workshop into very small pieces, have to concentrate each small workshop on one defined topic. We had to cut down the number of participants. We have to reserve more time for the workshops, because we had to explain much more in detail, and we needed, of course, a facilitator who read out the content of the screen if necessary, or repeats what was noted down, and so on. So the strategy to perform this workshop is quite different, and you cannot use some of the methods we wanted to use and which are described by Anja later. What came out with this workshop on smart mobility? We had a lot of identification of problems people have when traveling in the public environment. This is, of course, very traditional. What's about the information around riding a bus? About the bus stop? What is the next step? What is the next upcoming bus? What is its direction? And people wanted to have some services. They want to have an application which tells and gives this important information for the ride. And they want to have some services. For example, to send out a stop request from your app, or activation of the acoustic door finding signal, or request for lowering the bus, or a request for opening all doors. So there were a lot of interesting issues collected and gathered in a document which we lead in the next month to a DIN standard. And of course, we had a lot of discussion on automatic driving shuttles and what is the impact of automatic driving shuttles on the accessibility needs of persons with blindness. We are talking about a lot of different acoustic signals in the environment. For example, acoustic traffic lights, railway crossing, acoustic beacons for finding points of interest, and of course, finding, for example, lifts or location of operation signals. Finally, we identified requirements for the accessibility of the Spatial app, because this application has not to be accessibility at all. It has to be very efficient accessible. That means the usability of accessibility, and that means it should be individualized to the needs of the person. It supports the information at the right time. It supports the pre-booking of services, And as a general rule, a safety journey has highest priority and not the operation of the application. This application was meanwhile outside the living project established as a prototype in cooperation with the University of Paderborn, and at the moment we are running a test bed, the test field in Paderborn, where some partners, for example, the local network provider for public transport and other partners support this idea, and we have a test implementation which is now started officially. And the outcomes of all this workshop and many discussions ends up in the DIN standard, which will be published in August of this year for comments. And to give you a final impression on the output of this work, we have prepared a small video. It's about 90 seconds with some impressions from the city of Paderborn and how this solution may work. I would like to ask Heike to start the video. It's in German, sorry, but I think it's easy to understand by following the pictures.
Mein Name ist Klaus-Peter Wegge und ich bin technikaffin. Technikaffin bedeutet, ich liebe mein iPhone. Und das iPhone ist für mich als Blinder eine prima Unterstützung und insbesondere die neue Kompass-App des Padersprinters. Sie hilft mir bei der Nutzung des öffentlichen Personennahverkehrs hier in Paderborn. Die Kompass-App hat 3 wesentliche Funktionen. Die erste Funktion hilft mir, meine Route zu planen, den Weg zu finden und Zeiten abzufragen. Die zweite Funktion gibt mir eine Monitorfunktion, das heißt den aktuellen Fahrplan für die aktuelle Haltestelle.
Nächster Halt, Freibad-Schützenplatz.
Und die dritte Funktion, das ist eigentlich die wichtigste, ist eine Art Radarfunktion. Sie bietet mir Informationen, welche Busse sich gerade nähern oder welche Haltestellen in der nächsten Zeit von meinem Bus angesteuert werden. Zusätzlich habe ich die Möglichkeit, mit dem Bus zu interagieren. Ich kann im Bus oder außerhalb des Busses mithilfe der App mir bestimmte Dienstleistungen anfordern, nämlich zum Beispiel das akustische Türauffindesignal für die vordere Tür, damit ich diese finde. Ich kann den Service anfordern, dass der Bus geneigt wird, oder ich kann während der Fahrt den Haltewunsch äußern.
Haltewunsch, Taste. Haltewunsch. Haltewunsch erfolgreich abgesetzt.
Das sind Funktionen, die mir das Leben wesentlich vereinfachen, wenn ich Bus fahre.
You an impression how it works, and we are highly engaged in improving the system and to extend it to other vehicles like trains or to other locations like traffic lights and so on and so on. Yeah, and we have now the feedback of 16 smaller and bigger companies who are intending to support this idea. Thanks for listening, and I'm glad to have questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Klaus-Peter. We already have a question in the chat, but we will keep that one and save that one for the main discussion at the end of all the presentations. And but people are already engaging, but I can't leave you without telling you that Marianne wrote, Klaus-Peter, your input is truly relevant and inspiring. And yeah, Shailendra said, totally agree. So thank you very, very much for your presentation. And my question is to any of you, do you have comprehensive questions to Klaus-Peter? that doesn't seem the case. So everything you said was perfectly understandable, Klaus-Peter. So thanks again. And then I would open the floor for Anja Gröll, who is going to present the 7 practical points for facilitating workshops. So Anja, here you go.
Thank you so much. Let me just share my screen. Of course, I can't find the option now for my PowerPoint presentation. Ah, here it is. Okay. So, thanks a lot, Sarah, and thank you also, Klaus-Peter Wegge, and thanks to you, the participants of this webinar. My name is Anja Gröll, and I'm a research assistant at the Institute for Managing Sustainability at the VU in Vienna. And I'm honored to present today the 7 practical points for inclusive workshops, which have been developed within the Living Innovation project from EU. So before we dive into this topic, I would like to ask you to think back to the last workshop that you've participated in. And I know this could be a long time, but try to think about a physical one. Like, what did the facilitator do? What tools did he use? What techniques to stimulate your creativity? And I'm going to try to name maybe some of them who came to your mind. So, for example, images are quite often used in workshops in order to stimulate creativity and imagination. In general, visualizing ideas is really popular by, for example, brainstorming or creating visual storyboards. And nowadays, even more tools are online, so Mentimeter or Mural might be some words that you have encountered already. And also there's often presentations with long presentation slides with loads of text on them as coaching sessions. So I guess you have seen some changes in my images. And don't worry, this is not your internet connection. This is actually on purpose, because right now you can see as much as a person with low vision, which means you can see less than 30% of what a sighted person perceives. So you could say these images are to you as useful as these tools are for people with visual impairment or blindness. And this is actually the problem. The problem is that a lot of workshop tools are designed for sighted people, excluding people with blindness or visual impairment. And this is exactly why the Living Innovation Project has developed these tools in order to foster inclusive innovation and enable innovation processes, including all stakeholders, because this is really important. Development of products and services, not including the perspectives of everybody, can lead to great fallacies. So to avoid this, I'm going to talk to you first about 3 things that you should consider before having the workshop. Because setting the stage right will lead to success, hopefully. And the other 4 sections are more regarding hands-on tools that you can work with within the workshop. And also, after this webinar, Klaus-Peter mentioned already the do's and don'ts of how you should interact with blind people, people with visual impairment. Are all to be found in our guide that you can access on the website. You can download it. So let's start. In most workshops, people are divided into groups, mostly a group of blind people, a group of sighted people, with people with visual impairment. But this is not always the most efficient approach. Actually, this is a decision that you should really think about before conducting the workshop and have consciously decided upon, because you should ask yourself, who am I designing this product or service for, and does it make sense to split up the group or not? And here's some examples to make it more tangible. So imagine you're a business that designs home appliances, for example, ovens or TVs. So these are things that are bought by individuals themselves, and everybody has their own preferences and wishes and needs. So in this case, it makes sense to have a workshop with a homogeneous group, because, for example, a person with low vision might want to have big monitors where you can clearly see the letters or numbers, but a blind person might will prefer tactile or auditive support with these devices. On the other hand, if you're designing something for everybody, and basically anything in the public infrastructure should be designed like this, like an ATM or a ticket machine, you should include as many diverse opinions as possible to increase the accessibility of these products and services. Another thing you should consider is the accessibility of information. Now, there's a lot of guides on the internet talking about fonts and colors and schemes that you could use in the documents, but I would like to talk about the techniques of how to create inclusive documents for everybody. Because what you should really try to do is have documents that include simultaneously large print and braille. Like this, everybody can access them. And you can do so by either working with a mechanical printer, which is directly connected to a computer, prints a large text file, and then punches in the dots. And here it's really important to follow this chronological sequence, because if you first punch in the brailles and then you print it, the brailles will be flattened. But this is quite an expensive option. So what you could also do is use printing services on the internet, or you could try doing it by yourself with swell paper, which is a special paper. When heated in the oven, you can feel what is printed above. So this is something that you don't only have to use for text, but you can also use for drawings. Here you can see an example of a questionnaire which was developed by Klaus-Peter Wegge, actually. And if you look closer, you can see the questions are written down for everybody to read, and also they're printed in with braille punches. But what is done here as well, because you should never assume that every blind person can read braille. So the actual numbers have been printed in braille below them as well. And when a person reads out the question, the blind person knows exactly where they are. And you answer this questionnaire by just pressing on an element which says yes or no. And you can do so by your fingers or using a pen. So this is actually a great example for inclusive documents. Another thing to consider before the workshop, but it affects the workshop itself, is the role of the assistant. Because most workshops work like this. You create groups, and they are supposed to brainstorm, and then you present your ideas in the plenary, and then you discuss them, and then there is next steps following them. So if you do so, you run danger of losing valuable information in the process, because as blind people or people with visual impairment discuss specific topics, they might not note them down. This is why it's very useful to provide them with an assistant. This assistant should not try to influence this process as little as possible, which means they should be very attentive listening and writing down what the people are discussing. And the only questions they should ask is, how should I formulate this, or should I write it down or not? And then when it comes to the presentation, the plenary, there's 3 types of presenters. And this is actually also the chronological order. So you should start with the first type. And as you see that the group needs more support, you just go to the second or the third type. So the first type is basically like a souffleur in the theater, someone just calling out some keywords to make you remember what you were talking about. But they don't really say a lot about the content itself. The second type is more like an interviewer, so asking questions with how they came up with specific ideas or what their intention was with given points. And the third option then is the presenter, who actually presents the results. So now if we can dive into the workshop itself. And what I would like to address here is people with blindness and visual impairment often struggle with spatial orientation. And in order to help them with the understanding of spatial arrangements and to understand the world better, it's great to provide 3D models. And if you think about 3D models, it does not have to be only buildings. Of course, that's great if you want to discuss how to redistribute the floor or how the bureau is built in general. But you can also create maps and figures with that there is so many unlimited options that you could use 3D models for. The only thing is that if you want to have bigger ones, they're a little bit more expensive, but then again, you can use them for a longer while. This benefits the education, the vocation, and the lifestyle of blind people, and can also be helpful for working with assistive technology of theirs. And now, if you don't want to have something that is only fixed as a model, as in the 3D world, you could also use building blocks. And now these images that will follow are actually from the workshop from Klaus-Peter Wegge, where they were building a technical device, a radio device. So you use building blocks like Lego blocks, for example. What is important is that there is different forms, shapes, and they should be also sometimes folding, for example. And first of all, it's important to pre-sort the stones to spare a little bit of time. And once you've done that, you should define the meaning for each stone with the participants. Like, for example, say the stones that have one knob are on top, the ones with two knobs are on the bottom, the ones that you can fold are dials, for example, or buttons. And the great thing about these building blocks is that they're flexible. You can assemble and reassemble them all over. And also you're free in your dimensions. So you can together decide on the dimensions themselves. And then you will wonder what things can come out of this. For further questions, please refer to Klaus-Peter Wegge. And now, workshops often work with impulses. So I've talked about the images, for example, like everybody knows those ink stains, like what's the first association that comes to your mind? But also they try to create this out of the box thinking by people collaborating with each other, throwing around with ideas. And the thing is, when you want to do this all inclusive, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, because you could also go back to those cards that are very popular in workshops, but just add certain features to make it more inclusive. For example, add some imprints in Braille on them. Like, I mean, you could write anything in Braille on them, but also images, or cut an edge so people also know where it's up, where it's top and where it's bottom. And it's also important to work with contrasting and very bright color, intense colors, so people with low vision can distinguish between them. Also, another thing you could work with is tactile soil. If you want to draw like quick sketches, so you don't have to go through the whole printing process, they're actual tangible, and participants can just throw back and forth their sketches. And so we had now the impulse of touch. Let's now talk about the impulse of sound, because this is also very interesting. And it's an approach to unleash the participants' imagination, but not only for low vision and blind people, but for everybody. Because noises and tones in general trigger people's associations, as you might know. And what is very helpful here are audicons. And they're short elements that you can either find on the internet or you can record them by yourself, because they're basically little outtakes from everyday life. And to show you what I mean, I have two examples. Do you see how you're instantly trying to find out what is it? Have I heard this before? What could the source of this sound be? And this is already sparking your imagination. There's another one. I guess this one was a little bit easier. And if you work, but that's a great thing about audicons. Like, if you don't really recognize what it is right from the start, your imagination can explode. So what is very important to consider when working with audicons, do not use film tiles or music tiles or any kind of slogans or something that are recognizable, because the trigger is too intense. Also, pay attention to the audio quality. Obviously, the sound quality should be proper for blind people and people with visual impairment, since it's their strong impulse. And think about the spatial acoustic arrangements because they can trigger emotions. I don't know if you've heard about it, but for example, there's these 8D music sounds that when you listen to them, they feel like they're passing you, they're passing your head, and they're in the back and in the front. It's a very fun experience. So yes, I think we've come to the end of the 7 tools. I hope that they were helpful for you. Please feel free to visit the website of the Living Innovation Project where you can download them. Anything I've said now, you will find in more detail on the document, on the guide. And maybe if some things were not clear, please ask questions or read the document. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anja. And I want to pose the question to the audience just shortly. Do you have the feeling there's anything missing or should be changed? Obviously not. If you have the feeling or if something comes up to your mind, you can write it in the chat and yeah, we will get back to it later on. So thank you very much, Anja, for this interesting presentation. And last but not least, I want to introduce Luca Breida. And I'm sorry, Luca, the name of your project that where you were the supervisor for is so long that I have to read it from my
Don't worry.
yeah, because the project name was Sensory Assistive Technologies for Impaired People, Empowerment of Disabled People by Non-Invasive Rehabilitation Technologies that Enhance the Senses. I hope that was right, and we're looking forward to your presentation, Luca.
Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. So thanks, Sarah, for inviting me. It's a great pleasure. I would talk about 4 projects, and then I will compare them. 3 are academic projects, and one is one academic project that has actually gone to industry. So basically, I've been working for more than 12 years on a single research question, which is of course very generic, which is how to use our senses at best when some of them are weak or missing. Today, of course, we focus on vision. The first project is BlindPad. It's actually one European project of the 7th framework that I had the honor and the pleasure to coordinate. And this project was inspired by the fact of creating one tactile tablet, which could be able to represent in relief some maps. So this was the very first idea. And we took the idea from a game that we may have played when we were children. So there is this matrix of needles that can have and can take any form if we put it on top of any object. So the idea was to construct this sort of matrix where the needles can be automatically powered. We actually built it in 4 years of project. Here you can see a video where we have one prototype of BlindPad. And we have actually done quite a lot of experiments where we have used it to convey basic shapes like little squares, but also maps of rooms and squares. Here you can see some exercises that we have created during the project. The nice thing about it is that this content is digital. So you can represent rooms. Those rooms can change. The walls can appear little by little. And so you can verify that the blind person actually learns how to use, and you are free to balance the information that you want to deliver. This is extremely different than paper that raised line drawings, in which the content is static. But with such a technology, you can dream about it. And I would like to focus on the fact that, as you can see on the top left corner, a sighted person can draw this content, and a blind person can touch it. So actually we are in a framework where a sighted person can create content for for blind people, and they can also communicate about this kind of digital content. So this has led us to study how this kind of technology can help visually impaired people, and especially children, to develop some basic spatial concepts. So the overall idea is not to create a technology that has a general use. The idea was to create a technology that could help blind children to develop spatial concepts. For example, we know that in orientation and mobility, it is very difficult to teach to a blind child the concept of districts, of some houses that are far apart. It takes years for a child to learn how buildings are located with respect to each other with only the experience of going around. So it is known in science that survey knowledge, top view maps are more difficult to learn, but once you learn them, then the spatial imagination of a blind person is more versatile because you have the view of all the map. So we have created some very simple exercises in which children have to decide which two squares are closest and which two are farthest apart. And I indicated them with the red and the green line. And by doing these exercises in a case control study, we discovered that children are able, after the use of this technology, of understanding the size of any shape better with respect to a population who did not use such technology. And also there is a monastic effect on children. They are able to remember better shapes after the use of this matrix in which information appears back and forth, of course, with using the tactile sense only. You can also play around with this technology, and you can picture a room with doors. It's a very simple sketch, as you can see. So the black dots are the dots in which you can fill them with the finger, and with the gray dots, they are just flat on the screen. So you pass your hand on top, and then you fill two dots. One is you, and one is a treasure. And the nice thing about it is that we run an experiment in which this screen was static. The person had to explore it, and then the person had to go in the room and look for the treasure. Of course, there was nothing in the room, so the person had to stop where he or she thought that the treasure was, and then the person was coming back to the room, and we were showing actually the real position of the person, so that the blue dot now is where you think the treasure was. And then we iterated 3 times, and on average, at the 3rd step, the person understands by himself where the treasure is. This is a very important aspect because in orientation and mobility, the blind person rarely has the chance to know if he has done a mistake with respect to a specific location. But if you have a pin array matrix, then we can display mistakes on top of it, and we can display it dynamically. And so we have published this work, and we have shown that this is a way for blind people to automatically correct mobility errors. You leave a blind person in a room, in an empty room with the device, and then the person goes back and forth and understands by making mental projections where actually the treasure was, and he can find the treasure by himself. And this requires minimal external assistance. We went further away. These results are unpublished yet, but here comes the case where a sighted person can co-create with a blind person, because if we connect this technology to a mobile phone, a sighted person can draw a square or a triangle, you can see the bottom right corner, and then a blind person can perceive it. So there can be iconic communication between the two populations. You can also connect it with the smartphone and use the touch screen to tap 6 places, and then you can also learn Braille. So for example, a sighted person can tap on the screen and communicate in Braille with a blind person. You can also use this technology to display something very different. It's like, for example, money, income, and outcome. Blind people cannot perceive graphics as we do it every day on newspapers, and we can display a bar, a very simple graphic bar, where every column is, for example, the amount of money that I spend every month. The good thing about it is that then you can place your hand on top of the display and have an overall view with touch on how much money you spend in a year, a very gross concept. So the idea is to use this tactile technology to give overall graphic information, which is not maybe very precise, but can make you understand things in the same way that sighted people do every day. And of course, you can also use emoticons, and since the technology allows you to dynamically change the pins, you can also use emojis where you have somebody crying with the tears coming from a tactile eye. So this can also be connected to, in principle, with social networks. So this technology allows to potentially make infinite exercises, and which can be useful for education and entertainment. And of course, we have arrived until the technology readiness level 5 or 6, and we have created a prototype which can be connected with a smartphone, with a PC, and also with the Braille bar. Of course, these pictures go around the internet and show you something nice, which is why this technology has to be available only for blind people. Sighted people as well, which always look at the screen, could benefit from the same technology that blind people use for necessity. But this could be used for eyes-free applications, where touching a smartphone can give us some information without us to have to check for this screen constantly. We can also keep it in the pocket and touch it. So this is again something that does not exist on the market, but is considered as a design for all feature. The second project I'm talking about is a tactile mouse. So the problem is similar, and the idea is can blind people access graphical user interfaces? Can blind people touch icons on a graphical user's interface? So the idea was, okay, let's make each icon on a background in 3D. How can we touch those three-dimensional icons? Which technology could we use? So we invented a tactile mouse, which is a normal mouse, but instead of the wheel, we have a 3 degrees of freedom small robot in which there is a disc that moves up, down, and then in 3 degrees of freedom, we say. So it rolls like an airplane and it pitches and then it goes up and down. So the idea is, can I mimic the way a single finger touches a 3D object by using a single device? So the answer is yes. Basically, this mouse, which is patented, is you can see here the detail about the small robotic system. The idea is, as you put your finger on a real object, this is a real object, the finger actually is stimulated by the object, and then you can, of course, the finger goes up and down, but also the object, since there is an inclination, the finger also feels this kind of inclination. So the fingers feels the local features of a real object. So the mouse actually gives exactly the same information to the finger, which is touching a three-dimensional figure. So the metaphor is this one, imagine that with the mouse, your finger is exactly on top of that specific point, which is high, but is also a bit inclined. And then the disc is inclined exactly of that specific amount. Well, we published this result, but what I'm happy about this kind of results is that we allow blind persons to interact with digital objects and three-dimensional objects. Not, of course, the object has to be convex. It cannot be concave, but at least it is something. And the good thing is that these digital objects can change over time. So you can display a cake, but also you can also display a cake that has become half of it. And so you can touch and you can see, okay, that this digital content has changed. You cannot do this with, for example, with static plastic material that blind people use in rehabilitation programs. Again, these kind of objects can also be experienced by sighted people as well. So again, this kind of three-dimensional digital world can be sensed with vision by sighted people and with touch by blind people. The third project I'm mentioning is a tactile FOVA. This is another, it's a completely different approach. Here, information is given on the body of blind person. We know blind people use a digital compass, actually the real compass, so they touch, they know where the north is. And the idea is, why don't we give this information about where something is on the forehead of the person? So we placed a Velcro strip with some vibromotors in specific locations, and then we ask blind people to wear this Velcro strip on the forehead. And if something is on the north, then we make vibrate at the center of the forehead. If something it's on the northwest, then we make vibrate another vibromotor. Now, what you don't see in the presentation, I will mimic if you see my face, is that if the person then turns toward the information, so the vibromotor changes of location. So actually, there is an information which is fixed in the system of reference of the Earth. It does not change if the person turns. It is exactly as having a compass, which is always points towards a location, except that the location is completely digital. So we have used this system to assist blind people in keeping the path straight. We know that without points of reference, blind person, and actually also blindfolded sighted person, when they are blindfolded, they start turning in bigger round circles. So they lose the reference points. This technology allows blind people to go straight, because the vibromotors always indicate the correct direction. And if I go left, then I have a vibromotor who tells me, okay, go right and go left, depending on the path. So it can also be used in orientation and mobility programs. These three projects has been financed by the European Union, and I would like to underline how important it was to collaborate with two important institutions. One is in Poland, which is FIRR. And I would like to thank Aleksander Waskilewicz and Piotr Witeks, which were good collaborators for 4 years. I especially would like to mention the Institute of David Chiossone from Genoa, which is the city I'm talking from. They have been extremely collaborative and important in all this research. And actually, they have also inspired some of the research, like the tactile FOVA was something that came out with a brainstorming with them, and you will see that this idea has got quite a lot of citations. I end my my talk by talking about a fourth technology. This fourth technology, it's a bit off topic with respect to today, but you will understand why I cite it. So the first reason is that it's what I'm doing now. It's a technology that attempts to solve the cocktail party problem, which is the problem in which I am surrounded by people, and I just would like to focus on one because the other two are talking, and I cannot isolate them. So the solution we propose is a pair of glasses that if you wear them, they only focus the voice in front of the person, so the person you are looking at. It's a technology that processes the sounds depending on the direction they come from, and they have led to a product, actually. So of all these projects, this is the project that has come to industry. And actually, I founded a startup, which I'm running since 2 years, and we are going on the market right now, actually. So this is if you're interested in the website. Why I'm talking about my project now? So let's wrap up 12 years of research. Let's look at those 4 projects, where they started, what was the technology readiness level when they ended, if they got a patent, how many citations they got, and also we divided the number of citations by the number of years, because some projects are very long. Well, you might notice something. Well, first of all, what is the project that I decided to carry on in my startup, GlassSense, so the last one. You can see that it is the project with the most advanced technology readiness level, according to the European guidelines, but also the one who got less citations. And there is a very strange trend. The more citation I got on the paper I published, the smaller the TRL. So the minor, the less the readiness for this project to become an industry. So, well, this is just a provocatory slide, which is telling you, well, if you make many years in the academia trying to publish a lot, and then you think to open a startup, it looks like a very high number of publication does not happen at all. So because actually the project that was closest to industry was exactly the one for which we didn't publish a lot. So to tell the truth, after the 3 years, we decided not to publish anymore because we wanted to keep the intellectual property not secret. But at least, I mean, there is a clear trend. I mean, it's incredible. So this is a question for the academics: how to go to the industry when when at least my results are indicating that making very nice publication does not lead you to the path to the industry. So this is why I mentioned also this my last project. And feel free to ask me any question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luca. I think this was wonderful to see how we can make the steps from the research to the product, and really specific products we all could see. So thanks. We have some questions in the chat already, so I really want to discuss them with you all, and also want to invite you. That's your chance to contribute to the 7 points of facilitation. So if you have any ideas to address the 7 points, or have some content you want to contribute, please write it in the chat box. The first question we have, there was a lot of a discussion about the Braille reader, and the first question is really, it's how much should it cost? What would it cost if we go to the Braille reader? It's for you, Luca.
Well, I, of course, have written a business plan to check how interesting could be for the industry. The technology we have built and tested, BlindPad, we think that with some investments, so in production of hundreds of units, it could cost 3,000 euros. I know that there are advanced technologies. For example, you can look at graffiti, which is produced by an American company. I am not updated on the matter, but at least 1 year ago, their production costs are 15,000 euros per unit, but they were producing very few units. So the cost for the final user depends it's very sensitive to the number of units that a company is producing. I know this very well because with GlassSense it's the same. We have produced 100 pieces. Their production cost is twice as what you would get if you produce 1,000 pieces. So it's really a question of how much investments a company gets, and this really drives the production cost down a lot. If you're building few prototypes, it's not going to work. With an exception, the tactile mouse was constructed with low-cost materials. With producing one mouse costed us 200, 300 euros. So scale production of this kind of device would cost 20 or 30 euros for each unit. So, but it was done from the beginning because the material were 3D printed. The same motors that you have on drones were driving the coin. So unless you start from scratch saying, okay, I'm only going to use off-the-shelf material, then prices are very high at the beginning, and it's normal.
Thank you very much, Luca. So I want to address Misha. The question was from you, and you were really interested in it. Are you happy, or have you something to add or a question to add to this? Because I think the specific products were really a content of the chat box. So please feel free, Misha, if you have a further question.
I was simply surprised, baffled actually, that something as simple as providing a dynamic text tactile to visually impaired people does not exist. That sounds like such an obvious choice. And it's wonderful to see that you have a low resolution portable product, but it is very low resolution. And it has so many useful applications. So, of course, also with a little bit of engineering in the background, I wonder how is it possible that this user group has been completely forgotten about? Because there are so many possible applications. So it's really curiosity and encouragement, but the market is also part of what is needed for these things to happen. For me, this is a first great step, and then we see whether it becomes more high resolution and more dynamic in the future.
Yeah, well, engineering is the art of making what you want with the things you can get. So we really realized that, you know, in a European project, you have to deliver. You cannot just say, okay, we have to improve. At a certain moment, you have to stop and test with what you got. Then we said, well, we have a 12 by 16 matrix. What we can do with it? We discovered there is really a lot of things that blind people can do with low resolution display. And especially if you cast this in the world of education, blind children don't need such high resolutions to learn what is a square, what is a triangle, what is a counterclockwise rotation, what are the basic concepts of north, south, east, and west. This is the basic of orientation and mobility. High resolution is for people who want to to touch the Gioconda. But I mean, this is nice to have, but this is not must have. So probably the effort should be, can we make a matrix where, you know, with very low resolution, we can do these two tasks. Okay. With the very high resolution, with the mid resolution, these two tasks. With very high, of course, it's the best. Why do you have to wait to have a high resolution to make a product? It's useless. So, but then the industry comes and tells you, oh, I'm giving you 2 million. How many users are you going to serve? Are you serving only children of rehabilitation institutes? How many of them with respect to the total of blind persons? I personally think that if you rely on only private capital, nothing is going to happen. Of course, the state has to invest on this kind of technology by saying, okay, it costs you 3,000 euros, I give you 2,000, then you pay only 1,000 to buy a low resolution display that is produced only in hundreds of units. Only in this case, things can work. Otherwise, it's a chicken and egg problem. You wait at the high resolution, but then you have to wait 10 years because the technology is not ready. What do blind people do in these 10 years? Nothing. It's, I mean, you see.
And for me, there is also another connection now with lockdowns, studying from home,
of course,
where especially
here you go,
blind people sit there and they're like, what am I supposed to do? Like and there's so little help that's available, and just text to speech just doesn't do it. This is why I was thinking about high resolution, in the sense that if I can actually read dynamically appearing text, whether that's captioned or something like that, that would be the next level. But you're totally right. This is already a huge step forward. So go with it, run with it, and I wish you the best success possible.
Thanks.
Thanks. That sounds great. So I want to make a connection to a question Claire was asking in the beginning, talking more about software. Maybe our presenters can answer this too. It was addressing the Microsoft Office suite. So maybe Claire, maybe you want to ask your question if you're already there with video. Otherwise, I would go further back to Micha, because he also had a concrete question, specific question for Klaus-Peter about the process to how include the technical suppliers. So, Micha, feel free again to ask the question again.
So I feel it's incredible to see how you were able to convince or invite public infrastructure, plus the technical suppliers, plus the bureaucracy. So to me, this is one of those moments where I regain my faith in humanity And I wonder, what were the steps, or how long were the processes that you went through in order to be able to succeed with such a really impressive project?
Sometimes life is a little bit strange. As we started with this thinking about supporting the mobility of persons with disabilities, I think the requirements were quite clear, and they needed to be fixed and written down in a clear manner. That was the early intention. And then it appears we have some tendencies in our world. One is the tendency of open data. That means most information in public transport are available somewhere, but they are there in very different ways, in different formats. And the next step is how to get the infrastructure on the bus, on the train, on the device. And with the internet technology, the internet boom, which is on board on every vehicle, suddenly the technical requirements are quite low. You have simply to do it. And the good thing, we were at the time where several people are thinking about bringing things together. And there is a big demand to have a standard on that. There are many solutions available which in this and that way provide this information, which offer these services, but these are simply standalone solutions. They are not compatible to each other. Every company has its own approach. And there is now a big demand to harmonize. That means the project which is currently under progress is not about technology. Technology is there. What has to be done is quite simple. It has simply to be done. What we need is a European standard of transferring information and transferring the service requests in a safe and efficient manner. And it's simply a question of technology, and it's just the time to bring forward. And the video you have seen this afternoon, it's available since Friday. And I got a very lot interesting phone calls since then, where companies addressed me for more information. And I hope this will continue and will make progress. This is not only for our information, it is hopefully to making progress in the best way as a European standard.
And I imagine that you've put quite some time into this interfacing and found some of the problems with it. So you may actually be the ones that can influence and shape that standard. I don't know. I'm thinking about an API or something like that.
It's not so complicated. It's quite easy. You have simply to reserve in the Bluetooth technology some bits and bytes for this purpose, and we have to standardize this. That's very easy. It's open technology. So you have simply to do it, but you have to convince all these companies who are currently providing your special app for Vienna, your special app for Barcelona, your special app for single small village. And what we need is not an application for this and that. We need one application which provides the basic information.
Mm-hmm. Thank you
very much.
Thank you. So we had a question from Eva in the chat. If you could please post the link to the video. I think many people thought it's really inspiring. And we have a discussion about competition and prices, bringing this product forward. Is there somebody who want to ask a question about this topic of competition and prices, and what's the pro and the cons of this? Please feel free just to take a word.
Well, I participated in that prize, we made a submission. Actually, the unpublished work that I showed to you, the one with the in connection with the Braille bar, was exactly what we submitted to the European Commission. But I mean, the answer was that we did not reach the minimum requirements for the standards. So of course, so although we did not agree with the decision, we accepted it. We don't know what happened next because there was no clear winner. So we don't know what happened actually. So actually, this stayed as a prototype, which is quite advanced, TRL 6 or 7. But of course, more funding is needed to push it further and integrate it in an industrializable project. Actually, the prototype was battery powered and communicated with Bluetooth with the smartphone, so it was quite advanced. But honestly, I don't know what are the initiatives at the EU level for this tactile graphic topic.
Thank you, Luca. So has somebody something to add about the prices? I see Christian has his video on. Maybe you want to add something?
If I may join in there.
Yeah.
Hello, Christian Vogelaar from the Austrian Association in Support of the Blind and Visually Impaired. So it's obviously our members we're talking about here, right? So yeah, we were also looking at the price, and we would have loved, as I wrote in the chat, to see a winner emerge, or to really see a product emerge out of that price. And the problem we often see, and that is what Luca also said, that the prices for assistive technology, especially for Braille technology, are so high that you won't find someone to really produce it, except if there is a commitment by a country or a state to really fund the production, right? So the really large problem we're facing, and that's a problem we not only have in Europe, but also in Asia and in the States, is that assistive technology, if it's only meant for a small portion of people, is not marketable, and the prices are just too high to be competitive. So you need state funding, you need public funding for that. And that's only happening if there is awareness in the public government, and not if we're just talking about persons with disabilities and not with persons with disabilities, right? So that's something that we often see. And I hope that your presentation here and the option to include persons with disabilities in innovation processes will also raise that awareness, right? So that's something really good on you, and really want to support you in doing that, and say great work, and keep that up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a real good work for the ending, because talk with people is our aim in the whole responsible research and innovation process, and we started this living project with it. So thank you all for all your inputs, and we'll at the last minute we'll get back to my colleague Sarah, because I think she had a bit of advertisement for our handout and maybe a thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rainer. Yeah, I wanted to advertise that we are planning a handout on inclusive innovation. So if you are interested, just keep updated on the website of the Living Project. And yeah, then I want to say thank you to every one of you, to the speakers, and also to Eva from La Caixa, because she helped immensely to set up this webinar. And yeah, so the last thing to say is stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you all for participating. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.